Welcome to Conservative Solutions for Our Common Challenges. My name is Dan Albus. I serve as the Member of Parliament for Okanagan Lake, West South Kelowna. And this podcast is about the people that turn real-world experience into practical ideas that help Canadians. I interview people who inspire me, and I hope they'll inspire you as well. Today's episode is a little bit different from usual. Rather than a solution starting in Ottawa or a policy driven from the top down, we're showcasing a community-built solution, letting the people closest to the problems lead the way. When it comes to protecting Okanagan Lake from invasive zebra and quagga mussels, the Ottawa knows best just won't work as well as a local, community-focused reaction. So I'm joined by two leaders working together from two different angles. James Lidley, Chief Operating Officer at the Okanagan Basin Water Board, or the OBWB, and Colin Pritchard of the Colin and Lois Pritchard Foundation, helping fund an innovative eDNA detection project with UBC Okanagan. James, Colin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
So James, maybe we'll start with you. A quick snapshot. What does the Okanagan Basin Water Board do, and what personally brought you into this work of regional water protection?
So the Okanagan Basin Water Board is a partnership between the three regional districts in the Okanagan. We serve all the communities from Mussels to Armstrong, and we really just provide water leadership on a range of water issues. We do water science and water policy. We have a program to control the milfoil in the lakes, and we do a lot of water communication as well. We've been around since 1970, so we're not new. Personally, I really fell in love with this work through my undergrad at UBC. I did political science, so I like the policy side, and I did human geography, which got me interested in environmental issues. And then I did a master's in local government sustainability planning, so I was able to marry those two things together. And then through my work with the Water Board, I became aware of the invasive mussel issue, and have since become an expert on invasive mussel prevention in BC.
Well, we're really lucky to have you here today. Colin, you and your wife Lois have invested in practical solutions across the Okanagan for years. So my question to you is, why this project? What made you say, we need to step up for our lake now?
Well, Dan, I was born and raised in Vernon, and I spent umpteen hours on Kalamalka Lake and Okanagan Lake growing up. And when I saw the damage that these mussels had done to Lake Winnipeg and to some of the other lakes, I thought we just have to do whatever we need to do to ensure that this doesn't happen to our watersheds.
Well, on that point, let's get to the threat and what's at stake. James, for listeners who've heard about zebra and quagga mussels but have not seen them, what actually happens to a lake that gets infested, like Lake Winnipeg, ecologically, economically, and for the day-to-day life on the water?
Utter devastation, Dan. So these mussels are prolific breeders. One adult female mussel can produce up to 1 million eggs in a reproductive cycle. On average, zebra mussels, from the time they're introduced to a water body till the time they reach that peak population of billions or even trillions of mussels, is only 2.6 years. And each individual mussel is only about the size of a thumbnail, but it can filter 1 liter of water per day, and they can grow to densities of 700,000 per square meter. So you can imagine a couple million mussels just covering this table in front of us. With each of them filtering 1 liter of water, they can filter entire lakes in a matter of days or weeks. And that basically takes all of the nutrients that feed the food chain out of the water. So you get less fish. The fish that are there, they grow more slowly, redistributes the nutrients to the bottom of the lake, creates toxins. At first, it looks like the lake is beautifully clear. You can see down to the bottom, but that's really false security, because in a few years, they start dying off and releasing all of the dead muscle mass, and all these toxins that they've been concentrating in their flesh leads to toxic algae blooms, botulism and E. coli in the water. You get bird kills. So that's the ecological side of things. The mussels also, because they're so small, they're razor sharp. And so when they die off, these massive mounds of mussel shells wash up on your beaches. You can't walk in the water or on the beach anymore in bare feet. There's lots of examples of people who've cut their feet. And then from an economic perspective, unlike native mussels in BC, these mussels can attach with a little string of proteins called byssal threads, and they create a complex web that traps microorganisms and bacteria, and it starts to corrode the surfaces that they're attached to. But they'll also grow on each other. So there's a great photo from Lake Mead of a 2-inch diameter pipe. And after 6 months in the water there, the pipe is completely unusable. So in the Great Lakes, where there have been power generation stations, they've got these cooling systems. And once mussels arrived, they had to double the cooling system so they could shut one down at a time to clean it. And so that was a massive infrastructure cost. They also changed the smell and the taste of the water quality that's coming in. So if they get here, we're going to have ecological devastation. Our quality of life, Colin mentioned growing up in Vernon. I was born and raised in Kelowna too. I share the same love of the water that Colin does. And, imagine bringing your kids or grandkids to the lake and just not being able to have that great experience that we're famous for in the Okanagan. And then it's going to hit us in our wallets. Our power bills will go up. If you own a marina, the cost of a marina, an individual boat slip will probably go up about $34 per slip. So, the Kelowna Yacht Club has 1,000 slips. That's $34,000 in added maintenance costs. Province-wide, the estimate is hundreds of millions of dollars per year.
So going from peaches and beaches to utter devastation. So what would that do to our tourism industry?
Well, I think we'd see a lot less tourism. There wouldn't be as many reasons to come for the water-based recreation, but also a lot of our agriculture is irrigated through pipes coming from the lakes. And the average person, running a winery or an orchard isn't going to be able to pay for the costs of bringing that water in anymore. So even our non-water-based tourism is dependent on healthy water systems.
So Colin, as someone who's lived here his whole life in the Okanagan, it's clear that this is why you're stepping up.
Exactly.
But also, it's not just you, I understand. It's also the Rotary clubs.
Yes. The Rotary clubs, Kamloops and Revelstoke to the border, we anticipate are all stepping up to not only help fund this additional $100,000 we need to complete this program, but they're also going to make their communities aware of this devastating potential problem that these mussels will bring to our watershed.
So I think we've kind of talked about some of the potential devastation and the problem itself, but maybe let's move into some of the solution here so that our viewers can get a better understanding. So James, in plain language, how would a eDNA detection system work for boats and gear? And why could it be a game changer compared to what's used today, whether it be visual confirmation or a canine that is trained?
This is a really novel approach that was come up with. Colin suggested the idea, what if we could mimic a dog's nose and have the dog sniff the boats and they can detect mussels that humans can't inspect. Human inspectors are about 75% effective, and dog inspectors are 100% effective. But there are costs and issues with the length of the day that the dogs can work and those sorts of things. So Dr. Michael Russello, taking Colin's idea, he thought, how can we make an artificial dog's nose? And he's a geneticist, and what he explains is that all organisms shed DNA into their environment. So E being environmental DNA. We think about crime scenes, and in the old days, we've all seen on the movies where detectives are looking for a hair follicle or a toothbrush or something like that. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, the detection is good enough that you can take a water sample from a water body, and you can not only determine what species are in that water body, you can even sometimes estimate how many of each of those species are in there. And one way that they now detect at crime scenes is to take a specialized wet dry vac, like a dust buster effectively, with a filter on it that is meant to catch DNA. And typically once you capture the DNA or take that water sample, it has to go to a lab. But Dr. Russello says, well, there are also labs that fit in a suitcase that you could use right beside the road. And so this research asks, how effective could we make a test for mussel DNA on a watercraft? How could we use that kind of vacuum system that they use at a crime scene on a watercraft? Like, where specifically would you have to vacuum? What attachments would you need? And then can we feed that into a suitcase lab right at the side of the road? And effectively, in a few steps, just like having your luggage swabbed at the airport and then put into their sampler, can we do the same thing on a watercraft coming into the province?
So there seems to be that, this threat of invasive mussels coming from other jurisdictions. For example, from the United States, it's the Canada Border Services Agency, and they have, I believe, the canine unit. But again, they don't have one at every single stop. So often it ends up being other sources of confirmation like visual. And the province obviously is dealing with traffic coming through the Alberta border into British Columbia. Where would this tool sit alongside with the province or with the CBSA's inspection and decontamination? And how would it speed up decisions, reduce false clears, and keep contaminated boats from getting in?
Well, if I remember correctly, Colin said, what if we could put a dog or a dog's nose at every inspection station?
That's right.
Right. And so I think that's kind of the idea. And then, like I said, human inspectors are 75% effective, one study found, and dogs are 100%. So if we can develop the technology through this project, can we make it 100% effective? And one of the cool tests at the end of the day is going to be taking the technology once it's developed and testing it against the dog's nose, having them, essentially sniff or vacuum the same watercraft to determine that.
And of course, once you've determined that the boat's contaminated, then of course you insist that it is properly cleaned and sterilized before it gets into our lakes.
Yeah, well, that's one advantage because both provincial and federal agents, when they issue that order now, under the Fisheries Act, they can stop you cold until that is.
That's right. Exactly.
Now, Colin, maybe you can give us a funding snapshot. So maybe give us the total estimated project budget, what has already been secured, what remains, and why groups like Rotary and your foundation are accelerating this practical solution.
Well, unfortunately, it's difficult to get all the funds through government agencies. So sometimes in the same way as, the hospital raises funds for various equipment for the hospital, we're doing the same effectively for this particular project. And so we anticipate we're going to raise the $475,000. We've already raised 80% of it or a little more. And once we've raised that, we believe that there will be some further funding coming from some other municipal agencies to further this, so that hopefully once we develop this instrument, there'll be funds to provide this instrument to various municipalities or various agencies that deal with water.
Absolutely. Well, it would have a model to drive itself. Because there would be savings for not having to hire canines and the amount of work hours required to do the virtual confirmation.
Yeah.
So I'm going to channel my inner Chris Walker or my inner Phil Johnson here, because you said there's not enough money from government. And, I want to just poke into that a little bit, because most people would say when there's a collective action issue, a threat, extrinsic threat, that it should be government that should be participating. So for this specific project, and maybe I'll start with you, James, but Colin, jump in. What roles, if any, do local regional governments, the province, or the federal government have in making this project successful?
Well, so as I mentioned off the bat, the Okanagan Basin Water Board is a partnership of the 3 regional districts. So as far as local government leadership, we have also contributed $200,000, and that's thanks to the education and the vision of our board directors, mayors and councillors from up and down the valley. So local governments are on board. They're the ones who are going to end up dealing with this issue on the ground. If they get here, there's no way to get rid of them. The province also has multi-year funding, although we would argue that it needs to be increased. They run a seasonal inspection station program and can do quarantines and things like that. The federal government needs to step up better. So one of the issues is that the province right now is having to deploy some of their resources to react to any watercraft that are stopped at the federal border to do decontaminations and things like that. I know that Fisheries and Oceans Canada has recently added 2 inspection stations. What we would like to see and what we've called for a number of years is federal funding to match the provincial funding in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC, because those are the last remaining provinces without invasive mussels.
Yeah. So I'm really happy you mentioned that, because my next question is what kind of things that I can do as an elected official or other elected officials in our area to do to help, not just the project that you guys are capably working on here, but the broader mission to keep these mussels out.
Well, one of the things that I would suggest in the interim, at least, is that the borders be blocked from all foreign vessels, watercraft, any foreign vessel coming into this jurisdiction until such time as we have the ability to be able to test them to ensure that, in fact, they're clean.
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting point, because when I speak to CBSA officials or write to the minister, and previous ministers have responded to Mel Arnold, former MP Tracy Gray, and myself when we would inquire about this. But I know anecdotally from listening to boaters who are Canadian, go down to the United States and then return, sometimes they go through without any questions. And I think it comes back down to the lack of canine resources.
Yep.
It's not universally there. So that's an excellent point. And I think that's why, James, you're saying the eDNA would allow for someone to be able to quickly and accurately, up to 100%, be able to determine right away without having to be an expert. Now, how did you guys pull all the partners together? Walk us through connecting your UBC network to the challenge, getting the researchers engaged, and turning the idea into a plan.
I'm going to have to give credit to Colin for that. Colin came up with the idea. He brought us together. He brought the researchers together with his contacts at the university, because, Colin and Lois have been such strong supporters of the university. And then Dr. Russello came up with a solution based on Colin's idea, and he got us involved. So,
well, I, saw, of course, as you do, when you travel through an airport, they have the ability to determine whether you have narcotics or not. So I thought, well, surely to goodness, there must be some instrument that could do the same for the mussel. So I got in touch with the university, and then I connected with a company out of Italy that makes some of the instruments for determining narcotics. And then I got in touch with the UBC, and unfortunately, they found that the science that they use for determining narcotics is not the same as what would be for determining if you have mussels. So that's when Dr. Russello started to work. We first of all worked with an engineer at UBC, and they came up with basically a solution how to wash the boats. But that wasn't really practical for what we wanted to do. So then we came on to this next step to, actually make the instrument, or create an instrument that would do what the dogs do. And so we're hopeful that within the 2-year time frame that's been established to do this research, that we'll come up with a usable, practical instrument that'll solve the problem. And I should also say that one of the other issues is, of course, this dog only has so many years. So of the 2 dogs that we had here, one is due to be retired, and it costs about $80,000 to train a dog. It takes several years to do it. So that is a difficult hill to climb to keep enough dogs available to do the job. So to have an instrument that would do it, that
doesn't get tired,
all those problems.
Doesn't get tired, just puts in the effort. You just hit the button.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. James, Colin just mentioned that it might take 2 years, and he also mentioned the fact that we have a retiring canine. So it almost seems like there's a pair of scissors here coming to cut. Maybe you can just comment on the timeline. How aggressive is this timeline? Is it doable? And it sounds like there's going to be more government resources spent training new dogs. What could and of course these threats are coming both from the east and from the south. So maybe if you could explain what you think here in terms of timelines.
So I think that the budget and timeline are based on, a realistic number of resources and the time it takes. This isn't just an UBC Okanagan project. It's in partnership with the University of California in Berkeley, who developed the eDNA detection for invasive mussels, and with Queen's University in Ontario, who has the labs with the invasive mussels already there. And then Dr. Russello is bringing together existing technologies, which is nice because at the end of the day, it's not, will this work? It's how can we make this work? And so it might take 2 years, but if we are fortunate enough to raise the final 100,000, that's a baseline. And if we're able to raise more, then that might allow us to speed up the project timeline a little bit. And then as far as the scissors, I've been at this file for 12 years. And when we started, there were no watercraft inspection stations. Invasive mussels weren't listed in a number of legislation, both at the federal and provincial level. It wasn't mandatory to pull your drain plug until last year in BC. We have made a lot of progress. And, I remember having one close call where someone found something in the lake and I thought, oh my God, this is it. And fortunately, it was a different species, not an invasive species, but that made me think, what happens when we do get a call? What are the next steps? And ultimately, we don't want to think about that. We want to keep them out, but we also need to start preparing. And one of the things that's really critical for people to know is that there is no effective treatment. There's no way to eradicate these mussels once they come in. But if we look even farther down the line, one of the potential ways you could deal with this is through gene editing. And so Dr. Russello and I have talked about that, as a far out possibility. So the longer we delay them from getting in here, the more money we save, all these things. But we also make space for new technologies and new research that may be able to deal with the problem.
Yeah.
That's really incredibly hopeful because it is a bit of a race against time. So to have that, not just the technology to help the prevention, but perhaps that might lead to an answer if it, God forbid, ever happens. Exactly. Now, Colin, just in regards to UBC Okanagan, it sounds like you have a lot of connections because you've funded student training and equipment right across the Okanagan. What role can students and local talent play in this project? Maybe it's field sampling, maybe it's data analysis. You mentioned an engineer working on maybe the engineering department. How does that build capacity in our students in the Valley?
Well, there are great co-op programs. There's a new lab at UBCO where they provide a master's degree for people that have worked in the medical field or quasi-medical field, like pharmacists, that area. And they all look for the opportunity to work on situations on a co-op basis. And we might be able to employ some of them to work alongside of the conservation officers inspecting boats, and also help out in any way with the PhD student that's going to start April 1st on this project.
Well, that's amazing. It's a great investment, not just in our region, but in our youth and our future leaders. So that $100,000 gap, how can the public get directly involved with this project and show their support? Can they volunteer? Can they donate? What should they be asking? Maybe they're a member of a marina or like Rotary, a club. And how can they get involved?
So the easiest way, the most direct way, is to visit don'tmoveamussel.ca. And right at the top, we have a banner where you can donate directly to this eDNA project. And Colin has been working with his fellow Rotarians, and they're going to be helping to spread the word and raise the funds, which they're obviously, have been very effective in a number of ways over the years.
So we've got brochures, and then they got a QR code with the brochure, so you can donate that way. And we've got a video, and it provides for the ability to be able to donate through that video.
Tremendous. Well, great. We'll make sure to include some links so people can get more information about that. Now, let's talk about what success will look like in regards to this project. So, James, Colin, fast forward 3 years. In the best case scenario, what's changed on the ground for boaters, for inspectors, for these utilities, and for families at the beach?
Well, we've saved the Okanagan. We've saved the Kootenays. And we've saved hundreds of millions of dollars. That's the effect of what will happen when we've created this instrument to ensure that these mussels don't cross the border and come into our jurisdictions.
And to get there, we need to make sure that all watercraft, if we allow watercraft into the province or into the West, that all watercraft are being inspected. And the success from this project means that at that border, they are all being detected, the mussels are being detected with this new instrument.
Well, this is amazing what the two of you have brought forward here. Colin, coming up with the idea yourself, and then not just having the idea, but the tenacity to say, let's make this work. And James, your technical knowledge and your availability, I know I've seen you at many different events, and some having to do with water, some not. But again, bringing that point across, sharing information, helping empower people on the ground to know what they need to do to keep the Okanagan Lake. And as you said, Colin, it's in the Kootenays, it's the Shuswap. Our freshwater lakes deserve this protection.
Right.
So, James, Colin, thank you. Now, folks, I mentioned that today's episode has been different because it shows how community-driven solutions lead. Local partners, practical tools, and a clear mission to protect our lake, our economy, and our way of life. And to everyone listening, this is how we make for a better lake, community, and country, by backing the people closest to the problem and giving them the tools to help solve it. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As I mentioned, I always try to interview the people that inspire me by what they do every day, not seeking the spotlight, not seeking the attention, but just seeking results for their communities. I hope you, by listening today, are more informed and a bit inspired as well. I'm Dan Elvis. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.